the two things that are left in this unit before the exam is personality and social psych. There ain't no way I'm letting social psych suffer, all right? I mean, personality is going to take the hit as much as I can, because social psych is pretty cool. I almost ended up in a PhD program in social psychology, so it's pretty awesome. But we'll do a little bit on personality. In some kind of a way, we talked about personality earlier when we talked child development, and we talked about like temperament. Remember we said when babies are born, some babies are cuddly, some babies are real standoffish. Even from birth, this notion that they use temperament is sort of like the foundation upon which personality will develop. So what is your personality? Well, pattern of thinking, feeling, acting, things of this nature. There's 4 basic perspectives on personality that I'm going to spend some time on psychoanalytic. Number 1, I am 100% thinking it is a load of bullshit, but it is very well known. It is known in many areas, even outside of academic circles. So I will give Freud his moment in the sun. Okay? Humanistic, I'm not going to necessarily talk so much about. We will, because I realized that the information in here on humanistic personality was so intimately tied to humanistic therapy that we're going to be talking about in the next unit that it was a lot of essentially overlap. We're going to talk a good bit about trait theory, because I can get behind trait theory at least to some degree. And then finally, social cognitive, I'm going to kind of, again, not touch too much on because it's really highly related to humanistic. And so we'll focus on the 2 bigger ones here, psychoanalytic and trait theory. Okay. So Sigmund Freud believed, right, he's dead, that we're only aware of a small part of what goes on. So by far, I mean, he envisions this idea. Here is your personality. Here's who you are. And he says, look, there's 3 real big parts of your personality we're going to talk about. You can see one part is completely submerged. That is, we are not aware of it. You have no way to know about it. And then you see the majority of both of these 2 pieces are also underwater. Right? And it's only the tip of the iceberg on these 2 parts that you even have any conscious awareness. Okay? So, yeah, here's the difference. So here is his basic view, okay? That we have, well, when we're born, let's just say, when we're born with a single part of our personality called the id. The id is driven by what Freud refers to as the pleasure principle. It's like, gimme, 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 all right? Not only is it's incredibly selfish, it's all about me, and it is incredibly impulsive. It is give me and give me now, okay? And so, I mean, infants, when they get hungry, they just cry, they just scream. There is just, I want food now. Give it to me now. But what happens, according to Freud, is that this id, right, we start with the id. So then what happens is that the id is going to, the child's going to start to interact with the world around them, and they're going to start to perhaps develop what we would call a reality principle. And that would be like, well, you know, I am hungry and I want to be fed, but there's nobody in the room. So what would be the point of screaming my head off? There's nobody here to hear me, okay? And so the ego will sort of take the id's needs and demands and sort of direct them towards reality, okay? There is nobody in the room. Maybe, okay, you can scream again, but wait at least until somebody's in the room. Otherwise, there's no point. Okay? Then what should happen around 4 or 5 is the child should develop a superego. And that is essentially the parents and society, a sense of right and wrong, a morality of sorts. Okay? In the past, criminal justice research made reference to an underdeveloped superego. And this was an explanation for why people ended up in prison, okay? Because they did not sufficiently develop an internalized sense of right and wrong, a moral guiding post or something of this nature. So here's what's going to happen is now we have ultimately gimme, gimme, gimme now connected to reality a little bit. And now, in my opinion, this reality principle is really what self-control is about, self-regulation. Okay, I know you want it, but you need to wait for it. Okay, that's self-regulation. In my opinion, this is what socially responsible or socially cooperative behavior is about. I know you want that extra cookie, but you have to remember that everybody has to have a cookie. You can't have all of the cookies, okay? So it's a way of stopping the impulsive nature of the id, stopping the selfish nature of the id. So the id's two fundamental needs, impulsive and selfish, are now being controlled, okay? And so here is the idea, okay? You've got the little angel and the devil kind of a thing. You know the image, right? And so the angel is on one shoulder and the devil's on the other. The devil is the id, and the id says, gimme, gimme, gimme. And the angel says, no, 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 we don't do that, that's naughty. And the ego sits in the middle and tries to make both the devil and the angel happy. So say, for example, the id is going, I'm hungry, I want it, I want it. And so the id says, he has a candy bar. Go steal his candy bar. Just take his candy bar now. And the superego is going, no, 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 we don't steal. That's not right. That's not right. So the ego, that's you sitting in the middle, the ego should try to make them both happy. What does the ego do? The ego says, okay, I know you're hungry, and I know we can't steal. I got it. I'm going to go into my wallet, grab a dollar bill, and walk down to the candy machine and get my candy bar. Okay? Perfect. So now all of a sudden the id's impulsive demands are met. You know, they want food. The superego's demands are cool. We follow the rules that society imposes upon us. But what's going to happen is that there are going to be times when the id's and the superego's demands cannot be both satisfied. And so Freud talks about one of his biggest bullshit lines is that boys will go through what he calls an Oedipal complex. Y'all ever heard of the Oedipal complex? It comes from an ancient Greek tragedy. There's a guy named Oedipus, and he kills a king and marries the queen. Turns out that he was the lost son, and he killed his father and married his mother. And so Freud refers to the Oedipal complex as a time in a boy's life where he wants mom, okay? Wants her, and I'll have to use air quotes, wants her, right? Hopefully you get the carnal nature of the want involved. And so can you imagine the id is saying, I want her, I want her, I want her. The superego is going, no, okay, you've clearly crossed the line here. We do not do that. And so the ego is in the middle going, I don't know what I can do here. What can I do to satisfy both of these? I don't have anything. So what does the ego do in the case when it cannot make them happy? Is it represses it. Remember all that shit that's down below the level of the conscious mind? That's what's shoved down there. Just because things have been shoved down there, and this is going to form a huge basis of psychoanalysis as a therapy in the next unit. Just because you shoved it down there doesn't mean that it is gone. It still affects you. And in fact, according to Freud, that these unconscious things that you shove down there will manifest themselves in external behaviors. They'll influence your dreams. They'll influence the thoughts you have. He even says, like, for example, these repressed things will start to creep up towards the level of awareness, up to consciousness. And what happens is a child might have a repressed desire, and so then the child might develop a tic. You know a child with a tic. So what's happening, according to Freud, is something like, oh, this unconscious desire is just about to reach the surface and shoves it back down. And so every time the kid has a little tic, it shoves it back. Freud's full of shit. I'm just saying, I cannot repeat that enough, but he is an influential. But I want to put this out there. They did a study, it was about 5 years ago now. And they pulled up university catalogs and simply did search for Freud, search for the name Freud. And it turned out that Freud was pretty much in every single university catalog if you just search for the word. But what was amazing was he almost never showed up in the psychology department. It was other departments that grabbed his crap, all right? So though Sigmund Freud remains influential, not so much in psych departments, okay? That's just, we are smart enough to move on, okay? It's the people over in like education that ain't got it worked out yet. So, defense mechanisms, it distorts reality. So what happens is that we will feel, oh, that's right. When the ego fears losing the battle between the id and the superego, we feel anxiety. Anxiety is the price we pay for civilization. That was one of his most famous quotes, with the logic being, if we acted on our impulsive, id-driven desires, we could not live together as a society. Okay? And this is the basis of so much early philosophy, like Thomas Hobbes, right? Thomas Hobbes, who had this notion that man in the state of nature, life in the state of nature is short and brutish and nasty, and he says, we enter into a social contract. We agree with each other that I will not act upon my impulsive desires so that we can work together. Otherwise, everybody would be raping, robbing, and stealing each other. I mean, that is what life in the state of nature is. We give up our freedoms in order to exist together. Okay, cool. Well, it turns out that there was, Sigmund Freud actually was a very dominant person. He really got a lot of people to follow him, and he did not allow for any straying from his ideas. So Alfred Adler was one of his favorite students, shall we say. And then Clarence Horney was Horney, stop it, y'all. You know, that's why I put it there, just to make sure you don't do what you know you want to do. And so what happened is that Alfred Adler said, okay, yeah, I agree that these childhood conflicts can affect adult behavior, but they're not sexually related. It's not a repressed desire for your mother, okay? That's not what it is. It's much more, according to Adler, childhood feelings of inferiority are going to really be what influences adult behavior. And this is clearly the result of the fact that Alfred Adler had polio as a child, and so he could not compete with the other boys in things that the other boys valued, right? He could not compete in those ways. Karen Horney felt childhood anxiety was caused by helplessness and a desire for love and security, and it became clear that Karen Horney's childhood experience of being abandoned by her father was incredibly traumatic to her. So it was very interesting that that makes me wonder then what happened to Sigmund Freud as a child. So we're just going to go like this, yeah. Anyway, Sigmund Freud was so obsessed with sex. In fact, he said, you know, when you may well have repressed something, but it's going to sneak out like in your dreams, okay? And so one of his favorites was that, you know, you have a dream about smoking a cigar. He's like, dude, that ain't a cigar you're dreaming about, okay? That is a latent desire that you have repressed down there. And yeah, okay, Sigmund Freud. Carl Jung was definitely his favorite son, his favorite protege or whatever. Carl Jung was actually pretty interesting. He broke down the unconsciousness, and he argued that the unconscious mind, there's two parts to it. There's a personal unconscious, the same kind of thing that Sigmund Freud was referring to, but far more importantly, the collective unconscious. And that is an unconscious reservoir that we, as human beings, draw from together. Okay? He actually did some pretty interesting work in anthropology, and he went around the world and he was studying myths, right? Myths, mythology from different cultures around the world, and he found a lot of really, really, really common themes in the mythology of cultures that had no interaction with each other. And it was really amazing. You could have commonality. And he said the reason that you have the same common stories coming up over and over and over is they're being pulled from a collective unconsciousness. Okay? They're being pulled from a universal experience. If you take collective unconscious and simply substitute evolution, it becomes a lot less mysterious, right? We create similar mythologies because we share evolutionary history. So, could be. I like that. What are the flaws in Freud's scientific? It's unfalsifiable. He's got theories. It's like, oh, we've got a child here, and this child is, lighting fires. Why? And so he'll be like, oh, because his mother was cold when he was a baby. Yeah, or he comes up. How do you prove that false? Right? I mean, you can't. It's not science. It's shit. Okay? It's just not unrepresented. Oh my God! He develops these general theories. He does therapy with rich white women in Vienna, Austria, in the 1890s, and he creates a general theory that he is applying to all human beings on the planet. All right? Can you see that might be a little bit biased right there? It might not represent us, okay? There's to that. And then just after-the-fact explanations, and it's like, it's kind of useless. I mean, if I had to have any perspective on therapy or anything, this is garbage. It's like, why is he lighting fires? Oh, because his mom was cold and distant. How does that help me? You're throwing some words on there, but I need to get this kid to stop starting fires. And all you're doing is simply trying to explain after the fact. Since you're explaining after the fact, it doesn't help me fix the problem. How does this work for me? It's just crap. It's crap beyond belief. So trait theories, however, I can get behind. These are good. Much better. Trait theories are much better. However, trait theories have their origins in some crazy, crazy stuff. Back in the 1800s, there was this field of research called phrenology. Okay? And the thought was that we could read the bumps on your skull and we could interpret things about you. The basic idea behind phrenology is that all behaviors that you exhibit come from the brain. And the brain is a muscle. And so if you're strong in something, then your brain will be bigger in that area and will poke on the skull. And so if you have an area, and they broke up the brain, here is a rationality area. So if you have a lot of rationality, your brain should be well developed there, and I should be able to, oh, there's a little bump there. Ah, sweet, that shows me your rationality. This phrenology was incredibly popular in the 1800s, and so people would travel around the country and they would give free demonstrations to the community. Come on in, I'll show you how phrenology works. At the end of their demonstration, they would sell books. All right, these books would be about phrenology, and then there would be charts in there so that you could lay out the skull of yourself or your friends or something like this. And so apparently, there was no Netflix, there was no, they had no after-dinner entertainment per se. So what are they going to do? Is they sit around and they talk about their phrenology charts. All right, that's conversation for dinner parties or something. I got a hold of one of these books. I have it in my office. At first I thought, oh my God, this must be worth $1 million. And then I realized that there was like 10 billion of these things out there. They were everywhere. So yeah, it's pretty cool, but it's just, there are so many, you can buy it on eBay for like $5, you know? Pretty cool stuff, pretty cool stuff. Well, Gordon Allport was the guy that really took trait theory. And I can get behind trait theory a little bit because a trait is an enduring quality that makes a person tend to act in a certain way, like honest, shy, hardworking. And so trait theory is useful to me because it allows me to predict something. If you, in fact, have the trait of honest, it allows me to predict. If I put you in a situation where there is cash laying on the table, and this is the trait that you carry with you, I can predict the behavior you will exhibit. You get the idea? It allows me to predict what you will do into the future. If you're shy, if you're hardworking, or something of this nature. Okay? So the trait theory of personality says we're made up a collection of traits, and these traits kind of predispose us to behave in certain ways, and traits can differ from one person to another. And so I like this idea. So here, for example, Hans and Sybil Eysenck came up with this notion that everybody can be sort of categorized on these traits. We can talk about stable traits, unstable traits, extroverted, introverted types of personalities. And again, it's all about prediction of how people will behave. The MBTI is the biggest one that's out there. It's a test, the Myers-Briggs type indicator. And it works. Has anybody ever heard the MBTI? It sets up, I think, 16 personality types, 16 different, yeah. And I mean, I like it, but I do not like the way it has been misused. Because what happens is it sets up these 16 different types, and then it sort of says, if you fall into this type, then it means that you will be good in these situations. You will be successful in these places. So you take it, you get your type, and I can't even remember what the types are, but I remember there was judging versus perceiving, thinking versus feeling, and there was one other one that I can't remember.
Introvert versus extroverted.
Intro and extra, okay. And so you'll be like a JTI or something like that, judging, thinking, introvert or something. And then what happens is that this was picked up by human resource departments, okay? Because the idea was people that have a particular personality type will be successful in different areas. And so maybe, you know, this might be used for discriminatory purposes. Because they may well take you and you're about to get a job, and they're like, okay, we're going to have you take the, okay, and now we're going to use this to predict whether or not you're going to be successful in a job. And I mean, in some ways, yeah, if you want somebody to be a salesperson, they ought to be outgoing, right? They should not be an introvert. An introverted salesperson is probably not going to be a successful salesperson. So there's obviously some truth to this. But at the same time, they are also used by some major corporations to put together people into a work team. And so, for example, if you have 5 people on a team and they're working together, but they all have the same personality type, you basically only have one person on that team. Why would you put 5 together? They're all coming up with the same ideas because they have the same basic personality type. So it is an interesting idea about how these things work, and I have heard, though, actually it's more like this one, I had just learned another one, I just learned one about Korea this couple weeks ago, and it was apparently in Asian context, one of the first things an employer will ask is what's your blood type. Apparently different blood types will make you more successful in different situations. I've never heard this before. My wife thought she had told me this many times before, and I was like, that's the first time I've ever heard, what's your blood type? I didn't, never heard that one before. Very cool, very cool. So, clearly, traits are rooted in biology. They really are, because like I said, when a baby's born, they've got a temperament. I mean, the temperament. Some babies are clearly outgoing. Some babies are clearly more introverted. They really are right from the beginning. Some babies love to be held and touched. Some babies really just give me some space. So right from birth, you already find that the origins of traits are already existing. Okay? In fact, there's heritability. For most traits, genes account for 50%. I mean, it is a pretty big deal. I mean, which means there is still room for environmental influences, but clearly it is based very heavily in genetics. They predict moderately well. It depends on what you are trying to predict. Traits are not good for predicting very, very specific behavior, but traits are good for predicting patterns of behavior. So if I say to you, if somebody is honest, then that means I believe that if I put them in 100 situations where there was an opportunity to take money, they maybe 95% of the time would probably do the right thing. Because each one of us. But yeah, very interesting. Stability. This is very interesting, and this is the one that I told you earlier, is that they're very stable, that they don't really change much over the lifespan. And this is why every time you hear a woman that gets a boyfriend and says, I can change him, and the answer is, no, you can't, okay? If somebody's an asshole, they're going to remain an asshole. It just is what it is. Okay? Except, as I said, the one thing that throws us into the hopper is going to college. Right? Who you are before college and after college are like two different people, but otherwise, once you leave college, you are the same person forever. Right? So, yeah. Assessing personality is interesting. Okay? It is, here, where's the, well, some of the psychoanalytic techniques. Here we got, okay, you're right. So, free associate, well, yeah, this was, like we said, in psychoanalysis, Freud believed that just because you shoved it down doesn't mean that it's gone. And so what will happen is he will do things, say, for example, he'll have you, here, I'll do this. Okay, I'll say a word, and you say the first word that comes to your mind. Table, you say chair. Door, you say window. I say monster, you say mother. Oh shit, I think I found something. I think I found the source of your problems, okay? So he felt that if you could get people to relax and stop filtering, shall we say, you could get at the core of the personality in terms of dreams, things that people will not say, slips of the tongue, all of these things. Why does somebody keep calling me that has no caller ID? It isn't going to happen. Okay. Here is another way that Freud would, he would give, say, the thematic apperception test. And you see right here, you've got a boy. And they show this to people and they say, okay, tell me what the boy is feeling. And so you tell a story about what the boy is going through. And of course, in this scenario, the boy is you, right? That you're revealing your thoughts. So maybe he's like, oh, he's contemplating the emptiness of his soul. Okay, I think I know what's your problem now, all right? I got it. Or here is one of my favorites, the Rorschach. Favorites because it's so shitty. The Rorschach test. Literally, I've got my Rorschach tie on today, all right? It is an actual Rorschach. And I bought this one when I went up to Minnesota. When I was going to graduate school, I applied to the University of Minnesota. So I went up to Minnesota to visit the campus because I had an uncle and aunt up there. And up there they had a brand new thing called the Mall of Americas. All right? Got this at the Mall of Americas in Minneapolis, and it's an actual Rorschach tie. And for a lot of years, it was the only tie I owned. I wore it today, actually, because I'm the faculty advisor for Psychi, which is the Honor Society in Psychology, and they're doing inductions today during free period. So I figured it would be a good day to wear this for inductions. I didn't even do it on purpose. That's just a coincidence. Right? Totally a coincidence. But the idea is you're going to look at this and tell me what you see. What do you see here in this blot of ink? Yes, John is perplexed. I saw it. All right, a little perplexed. And so it actually comes with a scoring manual. Okay, it's really weird. If you focus on the central image, then it means this. If you focus on the darker parts, it means that. But if you focus on the light spots, if you use that as part of your interpretation, that means something else. I can tell you that in theory they got a scoring manual and they pretend it's all scientific, but the scores on the Rorschach have absolutely zero predictive value. They do nothing to help us understand people. Nothing. So it's a load of shit. Load of shit. Oh, here's the Eysenck's personality dimensions. Yeah. Anyway, hold on. The MMPI, however, is got some validity to it. And that's why I was trying to get into graduate school up in Minnesota, is that they are the home of the MMPI, which means that they have an incredibly powerful clinical psychology program there. And I am so thankful every day that I did not get accepted into that clinical psychology program, because I really am not that kind of person. I'm a scientist. I cannot imagine living my life in this world of non-science. You notice non-science and nonsense are very similar to each other? All right, so the MMPI, what it does is it asks a whole series of questions. There's like 450 true-false questions. And they look for a pattern of responding. And here's one of the obvious ones. So one of the questions was, when I read the newspaper, the only thing interesting is the comics. All right? Of course, we don't have newspapers anymore, but no, that was the phrase. For whatever reason, if somebody says true to this question about the newspaper, they tend to be clinically depressed. So clinically depressed people tend to say true to that one question. Now, I'm going to give this thing to somebody, I don't know who you are, here it is. You get the newspaper question, you say true. I'm like, you know what? That makes me think that you might be clinically depressed. Now, clearly it's not going to be one question because there are 450 of them. So it's going to be a pattern. People that are clinically depressed tend to respond in this pattern across these 12 questions. If you respond 10 of these out of 12, that makes me suspect that you are. Okay? So what might happen is, see, they have 10 different scales in here. Schizophrenia, Simon and paranoia, hysteria, depression, hypochondriasis. And so here is this notion that somebody before going to therapy or treatment might be represented by this blue line. And it's considered that you might be, how shall I put it? You might be crazy if you're on the right side of that line, right? And so somebody goes to treatment, and guess what? All of a sudden, their entire profile changes. I worked extensively with the MMPI because when I was in my master's program, I got an opportunity that there was a orthopedic surgeon and a psychiatrist, and they shared a lot of patients in common, okay? And a lot of people that were on chronic disability that were going to the orthopedic surgeon and the psychiatrist. And they identified a whole subset of patients that they could not find any physical evidence. The orthopedic doctor could not find any reason for these people's pain. Right? They were reporting chronic pain, they were reporting on disability, they could identify zero physical sources. And so they did MMPI profiles on those patients that were chronic pain but had no identifiable reason for the pain. And do you know what the MMPI profiles look like? Crazy, man. They were all over here. There. So it was kind of an interesting response to find. And I learned something very important. Just because somebody is a psychiatrist or a medical doctor in that way, they're not very smart. All right? And that's why they were paying me a boatload of cash to do what I consider to be very simple statistical analyses. Okay? So that's pretty valuable. You would be amazed who does not understand numbers out there. Okay? Works for me, buddy. So what happened was that now we have, as a collective, we agreed that there are 5 big personality factors out there, okay? Usually abbreviated, canoe, canoe, all right, canoe. I always heard about it as ocean, O-C-E-A-N, but canoe works too, either way. And so the idea was that if I wanted to, let's say for example I was going to have a blind date, and I wanted, tell me about my blind date. And if you told me these 5 pieces of information about this blind date, in some kind of a way, I would have a perfect representation of that person. Okay? So it's sort of like you could summarize who somebody is with just 5 pieces of information. And it's really kind of an interesting thing that they've taken this same idea and they've taken it to all sorts of different countries in the world. And they found it was true everywhere, that these 5 things. Now, don't get me wrong. In America, for example, we tend to be pretty extroverted. In other countries, they tend to be much less extroverted. But it is some combination of these 5 that makes a person. And so here's a dog. Gotta love the dog, right? Conscientiousness, not so high, okay? This dog tends to be impulsive, careless, and disorganized. Agreeableness. Oh, hell yeah. I mean, trusting, helpful. I like that. All right. How about neuroticism? Anxious and secure. Yeah. Man, I got a Jack Russell Terrier just like this. He is very anxious, and I think, and it's probably justifiable because he's so small, he can get stepped on any moment. So he's always hyper aware of his surroundings, prefers routine. Yeah, he really likes to just cuddle on the couch, most certainly. Affectionate. Yeah, just try sitting down at any point in the house without getting doggy love. Okay, so you could describe not just a human being using these 5 characteristics, but look at that, even a dog. I like it. Okay, good. So I'm going to take it now and I'm going to move into something cool. To me, that was not as meaty, shall I say. I like that idea, non-science and non-sense.